Hey everyone, today we're going to take a look at how you can install Heimdall on a Synology NAS. So Heimdall is a great little tool that you can pretty easily implement, which will give you a dashboard of all of your home lab services. It's fully customizable. You can select from a pre-filled list of different types of applications that they have set up by default. And then you can gather all of your home lab services in one location, and you can use this as a dashboard to access them all. So before we get started with this, I just want to mention that I have forward instructions in the description of the video. So first off, ensure that Docker is installed on your Synology NAS, and then you can go into File Station and you can create a subfolder under the Docker main folder called Heimdall. We're going to use this at a later step to map our configuration files to. And if you want to back up your Heimdall configuration, everything will exist inside of this folder here. When that's done, we're going to head back to Docker, and then we're going to go to the registry section, and we're going to download the latest version of the Linux server /Heimdall image. This is going to take about a minute or so to download, but when it's done, you should be able to go to the image section and double click the fully downloaded image, and then you'll be able to launch the configuration. So once that's launched, you're going to have to give your container a name and then select advanced settings. In the advanced settings, you're going to enable auto restart. This will just ensure that if your Synology NAS ever restarts or the container stops for whatever reason, it will automatically restart. From there, you can select volume, and then you're going to have to add the folder that we created earlier. So navigate to that, and then inside of the mount path, you're going to map that to the /config directory. And what that will do is when the container starts, all of the configuration files from the container in that /config folder will automatically point back to the Heimdall folder that you created on your Synology NAS. So if you navigate to it, you'll see at a later time that it contains all of the important files. And at that point, if you want to back up Heimdall, all you'll really have to do is back up that one folder. From there, you can head over to the port settings section, and I'm going to change the local ports to 8081 for container port 443 and 8080 for container port 80. Now, if you're using these ports for anything else, any other containers or any other services on your Synology NAS, you'll have to use something else. So just keep in mind that this is how you're going to access Heimdall when we get to a later step. Now, at this point, the entire configuration is done. There are a few environment variables that you can set, like the time zone, but none of those are necessary. They're all optional. So just go through, create the container, and then what I had to do to get this personally working for myself is I had to give the container a few minutes. I would give it 3 to 5 minutes, and then you're going to have to stop the container and restart it. In order for me to be able to access the web UI, I had to restart the container. If I didn't restart it, I was not able to access it. At the same time, though, you have to give it enough time to go through and create all of the configuration files, etc. So give it 3 to 5 minutes, stop the container, and then restart it. As soon as you restart it, you should be able to access it using the IP address of your Synology NAS and then port 8080 or 8081 if you'd like to use the HTTPS port. At that point, you're going to be brought directly to the web page, and you can now configure it. So what you're going to do is select Add an Application here. At the next stage, you're going to have to go through and give the application an application name, an application type, which will just be a drop-down list of all the application types that exist inside of Heimdall. Now keep in mind that you can leave it as none, and you can upload your own image if whatever you're trying to use does not exist here. Based on what you select, a color will automatically be selected. However, you can change this if you'd like, and you can also go through and add a new image if you'd like to use something different than the default. Now, inside of the URL section, this will be the URL to get to that service. So in this case, I have DSM. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the DSM IP address and port that I normally use to connect to it inside of this parameter. Now, the one thing I'll say is that depending on the application type that you select, there are certain APIs that you can connect to in order to display some statistics. So I'm not going to display it here, but for example, Pi-hole has something where it will go through and it will show some statistics inside of the individual tile. So if you select Pi-hole, you'll see at the bottom there that it is an optional section. As far as I know, that section is strictly there just to show a few statistics, but you don't necessarily have to use it. It looks a little cooler and you might actually get some value from it, but it's not something that you actually have to use. Now, once it's created, you can go back to your main dashboard and you'll see a little tile there. And if you select it, it will automatically point you directly to that service. So at this point, you can go through, add all of your personal home lab services and connect them all to the correct IP addresses. Now, there are a few additional things that you can do inside of Heimdall that I did not include in the written instructions, but I want to point them out here. And the first is that you can actually create a username and a password for this. So in the bottom right-hand side, you're going to see a little person icon, and you're going to have the admin username, and you can go in there, edit it, and you can select a password for it. And at that point, whenever you log in, you're going to be able to log in with that username and password. At that point, you can also change your avatar as well, so that when you log in, you'll see a little icon that you'd like to use. Now, after you create your first web service, in the bottom right-hand side, you're going to see 3 little lines there, and that's going to point you to your application list. Now, the first thing that's important to point out here is that if you think that you're missing a few applications, you'll see in my setup that I have a bunch of different applications here. You can select this Update Apps List button. You're going to have to give it some time, give it 5 to 10 minutes, but at that point, it should crawl down all of the applications that Heimdall has available. If you'd like to add, edit, or delete any of your applications, you can do that here as well. So that's as far as the configuration goes. So at this point, you should have created one or multiple services. When you get to your main dashboard, you should be able to select them to automatically launch them in a new tab, and then you'll be able to access them that way. The final thing that we're going to take a look at is the settings section. So in the bottom right, you're going to see the little gear icon. If you select that, there's a few things that I want to point out here. The first is the background image. So when you edit that, what you're going to be able to do is upload an image that you want to use, and it's automatically going to use that as your background. So at that point, it is fully customizable to be whatever you'd like to use. And the final thing is in that miscellaneous section. So you'll see by default that a search bar does not exist. So you're just going to have a bunch of tiles of all of your services. But if you enable that homepage search option, and then you set a default search provider, at the top, you're going to see that a search bar now exists, and you can go through and search whatever you'd like. So at this point, this is a good option for a lot of people if they'd like to replace their homepage. As soon as you launch your web browser, you're going to be brought directly here. You can either search for whatever you want to search for, or you can open up any of your home lab services. And if you're connected to the different APIs, you might have a bunch of useful information here as well. So I'm hoping that this video helped you guys out. The actual setup process is relatively straightforward, and the configuration is pretty easy as well, but you end up with a pretty cool looking dashboard that is actually very functional as far as accessing all of your home lab services in one location. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comments. If this video helped you out, give it a thumbs up, and please consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks, guys.